Elena didn't know that the man watching her from the shadows of the palace corridor was the most powerful alpha in the realm. She didn't know that her scent had been driving him to distraction for the past 3 nights as she worked alone in the kitchens, and she certainly didn't know that the moment she looked up from scrubbing the marble floors, her entire world would change forever. The palace kitchens were silent at this hour, save for the soft scrape of her brush against stone and the distant tick of the ancient clock tower. Elena preferred the solitude. No sneering kitchen maids to remind her she was nothing more than a foundling servant. No sharp-tongued cooks to criticize her every move. Just blessed quiet and the familiar ache in her knees as she worked. She hummed softly under her breath, a melody her mother had sung long ago, before the fever took her. Before Elena learned what it meant to be unwanted, the sound echoed in the vast space, mixing with the gentle splash of soapy water. A shadow fell across the moonlight streaming through the high windows. Elena's brush stilled. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she slowly raised her eyes. A man stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in clothes that spoke of wealth and power. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples, eyes like molten amber in the dim light, beautiful, devastatingly, impossibly beautiful. "Forgive me." His voice was deep, cultured, with an edge that sent heat spiralling through her chest. "I didn't mean to startle you." Elena scrambled to her feet, nearly overturning her bucket of water. "My lord, the kitchens are closed. If you need refreshment, I can wake the cook." "No." He stepped into the room, and something in her chest pulled tight, like a golden thread had been wound around her heart, and someone had just given it a gentle tug. "I was simply walking, couldn't sleep." She bobbed an awkward curtsy, acutely aware of her rough servant's dress and the water stains on her apron. "Of course, my lord, I'll finish elsewhere." "Don't." The command was soft but absolute. "Please, continue your work. I find the sound soothing." Elena's breath caught. Lords didn't ask servants to continue their work. They ordered. They dismissed. They certainly didn't use the word please. She knelt back down, hyper-aware of his presence as she resumed scrubbing. The brush trembled in her hands. What was wrong with her? She'd served in noble houses before coming to the palace. She knew how to be invisible, how to keep her head down and her mouth shut. But this man, there was something about him that made her skin prickle with awareness, made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her ribs, though she'd learned long ago to keep that part of herself buried deep. "What's your name?" The question startled her so much she dropped her brush. It clattered against the stone, the sound echoing through the kitchen like a gunshot. She reached for it at the same moment he stepped forward, and their fingers brushed as they both grasped the handle. Fire shot up her arm. Not painful fire, the kind that warmed you from the inside out, that made you think of safety and home and things you'd given up hoping for. Elena jerked her hand back as if she'd been burned. The stranger's eyes darkened. His nostrils flared slightly, and for a moment she could have sworn she saw gold flicker in their amber depths. "I asked your name," he said again, his voice rougher now. "Mary," she lied, the false name falling from her lips as easily as breathing. She'd been Mary the kitchen maid for 6 months now, long enough that sometimes she almost forgot who she really was. "Mary Collins, my lord." Something shifted in his expression. Disappointment, perhaps, or recognition of the lie, but he didn't call her on it. Mary. He said her false name like he was tasting it, finding it bitter. "How long have you worked here?" 6 months, my lord. The truth, at least. And before that? Dangerous ground. Eleanor focused on the floor between them, scrubbing at a stain that had long since disappeared. "Various houses, my lord, wherever there was work." "No family?" The simple question hit like a blade between her ribs. "No, my lord." He was quiet for so long she risked a glance upward. He was studying her face with an intensity that made her cheeks burn. You have kind eyes, Mary Collins, sad but kind. Eleanor's throat constricted. When was the last time someone had called her kind? When was the last time anyone had looked at her long enough to see anything at all? I should go, he said finally, though he made no move toward the door. It's late. Yes, my lord. But he lingered, watching her work with that strange, unreadable expression. Finally, he spoke again. I'll find you tomorrow. Elena's brush stilled. My lord? I'll find you, he repeated, and there was something in his tone that sent shivers down her spine. Not threat, promise. Sleep well, Mary Collins. He turned and walked away, his footsteps silent as a predator's. Elena remained frozen on the kitchen floor until she was certain he was gone, then sank back on her heels, her heart racing. What had just happened? She pressed a shaking hand to her chest, where that strange golden warmth still pulsed beneath her ribs. Her wolf was restless, pacing, whining for something she couldn't name. For the first time in months she felt alive, awake, like she'd been sleepwalking through her life and had suddenly jolted into consciousness. Dangerous. Everything about him screamed dangerous. Elena forced herself back to work, scrubbing with unnecessary vigour. She was a servant, a nobody. Men like that, lords who wore power like a second skin, they didn't notice women like her. Not really. But as she gathered her supplies and prepared to leave, she couldn't shake the memory of his eyes, the way they'd seemed to see straight through her careful mask to the woman beneath, the way his voice had wrapped around her false name like he knew it didn't belong to her. She extinguished the single candle she'd been working by and made her way through the darkened corridors toward the servants' quarters. Her footsteps echoed softly on the stone, the only sound in the sleeping palace. Elena didn't see the figure that detached itself from the shadows after she passed, didn't see the way amber eyes tracked her progress down the hall with predatory focus, didn't hear the soft words spoken to the darkness. Elena Thorne, so that's where you've been hiding. If she had, she might have run, might have gathered her few belongings and disappeared into the night like smoke, the way she'd learned to do when the past came calling. Instead, she climbed the narrow stairs to her tiny chamber, pressed her back against the door, and tried to convince herself that the warmth in her chest didn't mean anything. That tomorrow, when the mysterious lord inevitably forgot about the kitchen maid who'd caught his momentary attention, everything would go back to normal. She was wrong, of course. But for now, in the safety of her small room, with moonlight streaming through the single window, Eleanor allowed herself to remember what it felt like to be seen, to be noticed, to matter, even for a moment. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would be invisible again. Tomorrow she would remember her place. The days that followed were a whirlwind of stolen glances and racing hearts. Elena found herself watching for him everywhere. In the corridors, when she carried linens to the upper floors. In the great hall, when she helped serve the noon meal. In the gardens, when she hung washing on the lines behind the servants' quarters. Always searching, always hoping for another glimpse of those amber eyes. But he seemed to have vanished like morning mist. On the third evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Eleanor made her way to the palace gardens. She'd volunteered for the evening watering duty, though the other servants thought her mad for seeking extra work. The truth was, she needed air, space, somewhere to breathe that didn't smell of lye soap and endless drudgery. The gardens were a maze of sculpted hedges and winding paths, punctuated by marble fountains that sparkled in the fading light. Elena had always found peace here, among the roses and jasmine that reminded her of her mother's small cottage garden so long ago. She was filling her watering can at the central fountain when she heard it, a low groan barely audible above the splash of water. Elena froze, listening. There, again. Coming from somewhere beyond the hedge maze. Every instinct screamed at her to mind her own business. Servants who poked their noses where they didn't belong rarely kept their positions long. But something in that sound, something raw and pained, tugged at her heart. She set down her watering can and followed the sound deeper into the gardens. She found him sitting on a stone bench beneath an ancient oak tree, his head in his hands. Even in the dim light, she recognized the breadth of his shoulders, the way moonlight caught in his dark hair, her mysterious lord from the kitchen. Blood seeped between his fingers where he pressed them to his temple. "Dear God," Elena breathed, rushing forward without thought. "My lord, you're hurt!" His head snapped up, amber eyes wide with surprise. "Mary, what are you doing here?" "I heard—" She stopped mere feet away, suddenly aware of how inappropriate this was. A servant didn't approach nobility uninvited, didn't touch them, didn't presume to offer help. "I'm sorry, my lord, I should fetch the physician—" "No." His voice was sharp, then gentled. "Please, no physicians." Elena hesitated, wringing her hands in her apron. He looked so alone sitting there, blood trickling down his face in the gathering darkness. When was the last time someone had shown her kindness when she was hurt? When was the last time anyone had cared enough to stop? "At least let me clean the wound," she said softly. "I have some skill with healing." Something flickered in his eyes. "You would do that for me?" The question was strange, as if he truly couldn't fathom why anyone would offer him care. Elena pulled a clean cloth from her apron pocket. She always carried one for emergencies, and approached slowly. "May I?" She gestured toward the bench beside him. He nodded, his gaze never leaving her face as she settled beside him. This close, she could smell his scent, something wild and clean, like pine forests and winter storms. Her wolf stirred again, pressing against her ribs like it was trying to get closer to him. "This might sting," Elena murmured, dabbing gently at the cut above his temple. It wasn't deep, thank God, but head wounds always bled freely. "I don't mind," he said quietly. "It's been a long time since someone cared whether I was in pain." Elena's hands stilled. "Surely that's not true, my lord. You must have family, friends." "Position isn't the same as affection," he said, a bitter edge creeping into his voice. "People bow because they have to. They smile because it's expected. But they don't see me. Not really." The raw honesty in his words made Eleanor's chest ache. She knew something about being invisible, about being seen only as what you could provide rather than who you were. Slowly she resumed cleaning his wound. "I understand," she whispered. "Do you?" He turned slightly, studying her face in the moonlight. "Tell me, Mary Collins, when was the last time someone saw you, really saw you, not just the uniform you wear or the work you do?" The question hit like a physical blow. Elena's throat constricted as she fought back the sting of tears. I can't remember." "Nor I." His voice was soft, thoughtful. "Perhaps that's why I find myself drawn to you. You have the eyes of someone who understands loneliness." Elena focused on her task, trying to ignore the way his words wrapped around her heart like gentle hands. There, that should heal cleanly. She started to pull away, but his fingers caught her wrist. The moment his skin touched hers, that golden warmth exploded through her system, stronger this time, more insistent. Her wolf practically howled with recognition. "Mary." His voice was rough, strained. "Look at me." Reluctantly, Eleanor raised her eyes to his. They were glowing. Actually glowing, amber shot through with threads of molten gold. Her breath caught. "What are you?" she whispered. Before he could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the garden. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. Elena started to stand, but her mysterious lord's grip on her wrist tightened gently. "Don't run," he murmured. "Please." 3 men in Royal Guard uniforms emerged from the maze, their faces grim with worry. The moment they spotted the bench, they dropped to one knee in perfect unison. "Your Majesty," the captain said, his voice tight with relief. "We've been searching for you. When you missed the evening council meeting—" "Your Majesty." The words hit Eleanor like a bucket of ice water. Her gaze snapped back to the man beside her, the man whose blood was still on her cloth, whose touch still sent fire through her veins. The Alpha King. She tried to scramble to her feet, to drop into the proper curtsy, but his hand on her wrist held her still. "Eleanor," he said softly, and her heart stopped. Her real name. He knew her real name. "Don't." "Your Majesty, I—" Eleanor's voice cracked. She was going to be executed. Servants who touched royalty without permission, who spoke to them as equals, who dared to tend their wounds like they were anything other than divine. "Breathe," the Alpha King commanded gently. To the guards he said, "Give us a moment." "Your Majesty, protocol, now." The single word carried such authority that all three men immediately retreated, though Eleanor could feel their eyes on her from the shadows. "Please don't kill me," Eleanor whispered, her body beginning to shake. "I didn't know. I would never have presumed—" "Kill you?" He sounded genuinely shocked. "Elena, I'm not going to hurt you. I sought you out, remember. I wanted to find you." "But I touched you. I spoke to you like an equal. I gave you a false name." The words tumbled out in a rush of panic. "You gave me exactly what I needed," he said firmly. "Someone who saw a man in pain and offered kindness. Someone who didn't bow and scrape and treat me like I might shatter at any moment." Elena stared at him through the darkness, trying to reconcile this patient, gentle man with the terrifying figure she'd grown up hearing whispered stories about. The Alpha King was supposed to be cold, ruthless, a predator who showed no mercy to those who crossed him. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why did you seek me out? I'm nobody, a servant." "You're not nobody." His thumb brushed across her pulse point, and Elena shivered at the contact. "You're my mate." The words hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Elena's wolf sang in recognition, even as her human mind reeled in disbelief. "That's impossible," she breathed. "Is it?" His free hand reached up to cup her cheek, and Elena found herself leaning into the touch, despite every rational thought screaming at her to run. "Tell me you don't feel it, Elena. Tell me your wolf doesn't recognize mine." She couldn't. The bond between them was like a living thing, pulsing with golden warmth every time they touched. Her wolf had been restless for months, searching for something she couldn't name. Now she knew why. "I'm nobody," she repeated weakly. "You're everything," he said, with such quiet conviction that tears sprang to her eyes. "I've been looking for you for so long." "Your Majesty." "Adrian," he corrected. "My name is Adrian. Say it." "Adrian." The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that made her cheeks burn. "Better." He smiled, and Eleanor's heart did something dangerous in her chest. "Will you have dinner with me tomorrow night, in my private quarters, away from prying eyes? I want to know everything about you, Elena Thorne." Her real name again. God, how long had he known who she was? "I can't," she said, though every fibre of her being wanted to say yes. "It's not proper. People will talk." "Let them." There was steel beneath his gentle tone. "You're under my protection now. No one will dare say a word against you." Elena's breath caught. Protection. When was the last time someone had offered to protect her? When was the last time she'd felt truly safe? "I'm scared," she admitted in a whisper. Of me?" "Of this." She gestured between them at the invisible thread that seemed to bind them together. "Of what it means. Of what happens when you realize I'm not. When you see that I'm not worthy of—" "Stop." The command was soft but absolute. "You are worthy, Elena, of protection, of care, of everything I want to give you." His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Will you trust me, just for one evening? Let me show you what it feels like to be treasured." Treasured. The word wrapped around her heart like a warm cloak. Eleanor closed her eyes, fighting between everything she'd learned about keeping her head down and staying safe, and this impossible, beautiful man who looked at her like she hung the stars. "One dinner," she heard herself say. One dinner, he agreed, though something in his tone suggested he had no intention of stopping there. When Elena finally made her way back to the servants' quarters an hour later, her mind spinning with everything that had happened, she didn't see the figure watching from the palace gates, didn't see the cruel smile that spread across a familiar face. Marcus Aldridge had finally tracked down his runaway prize, and tomorrow he would make sure the Alpha King understood exactly who Elena Thorne really belonged to. The weeks that followed were a strange rhythm of stolen moments and growing trust. Elena found herself looking forward to their evening dinners with an anticipation that terrified her. Adrian, she still couldn't quite believe she was allowed to call the Alpha King by his given name, had been nothing but patient and gentle. He asked about her day, listened to her thoughts on the books he lent her, and shared stories of his own lonely childhood that made her heart ache for the boy he'd been. Slowly, carefully, Elena began to let her walls down. She told him about her mother's garden, about the songs she used to sing while they worked among the herbs and flowers. She shared her love of reading, though she was careful not to mention where she'd learned, the private tutors her father had hired before everything fell apart. She spoke of her dreams, the small ones she allowed herself, a cottage of her own some day, a garden, peace. Adrian listened to every word like it was precious, his amber eyes never leaving her face. When she laughed at one of his dry observations about court politics, he looked at her like she'd given him the greatest gift imaginable. It was during their third dinner together that everything changed. They were sitting in his private study, the fire crackling softly in the grate. Adrian had dismissed all the servants, insisting on serving the simple meal himself. Elena still felt strange being waited on by the Alpha King, but she was learning not to protest. He seemed to take genuine pleasure in caring for her. "Elena," Adrian said carefully, setting down his wineglass, "may I ask you something?" Something in his tone made Elena's stomach clench with familiar anxiety. "Of course. Why did you give me a false name that first night?" The question hung between them like a blade. Elena's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass, buying herself time. She'd been dreading this moment, knowing it would come eventually. Elena started, then stopped. How could she explain without revealing everything, without destroying this fragile happiness she'd found? "You're frightened," Adrian observed quietly. "Of me?" "No." The word came out fiercer than she intended. "Never of you." "Then what?" Elena set down her glass and stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the moonlit gardens. She could feel Adrian's eyes on her back, patient and steady. "My past isn't pleasant," she said finally. "There are people who might still be looking for me, people I never want to find me." "What people?" The gentle question broke something inside her. Elena pressed her forehead against the cool glass, fighting tears. "A man," she whispered, "a man who thought he owned me." The silence behind her stretched so long, Eleanor began to worry she'd said too much. Then she heard Adrian's chair scrape against the floor, felt his presence as he approached. He stopped just behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not quite touching. "Tell me," he said softly. "I can't." "Elena," his voice was devastatingly gentle, "look at me." Reluctantly, Elena turned. Adrian's face was calm, but she could see the leashed fury in his amber eyes, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. "Whatever happened to you," he said carefully, "it's over. You're safe now." "You don't understand." Eleanor's voice cracked. I'm not who you think I am. My real name is Eleanor Thorne, yes, but I'm not just some poor servant girl. My father was Baron Thorne of Millhaven. We had money, position, respect, until what? Until my parents died in a carriage accident when I was 17. The words tumbled out in a rush, as if speaking them quickly would lessen their power to hurt. I was alone, vulnerable. Marcus Aldridge was my father's business partner. He offered to help settle the estate, to take care of everything. I was grieving. Lost. I trusted him. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. At first he was kind, helpful. He took care of the funeral arrangements, handled the creditors. He said he was protecting me from the vultures who would try to take advantage of a young woman alone. I was so grateful. Eleanor laughed bitterly. I actually thanked him. What did he do? Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. He stole everything. Forged documents transferring my father's holdings to himself. Claimed I owed him massive debts for his services. When I tried to fight him, he had the magistrates in his pocket. They said I was hysterical, overwrought with grief, that I should be grateful Marcus was willing to take care of me. Elena's hands were shaking now. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces together. He said he would marry me, make me respectable again, said it was the only way to save my reputation, since everyone knew I'd been living in his house while he helped me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He said I belonged to him now. Elena. Adrian stepped closer, his hands hovering near her arms but not quite touching. Did he hurt you? The question she'd been dreading. Elena closed her eyes, the memories rushing back like a tide. He was patient at first. He said he was giving me time to come to terms with our engagement, but as the weeks passed and I kept refusing to set a date. Elena shuddered. He became angry, said I was ungrateful, that I owed him everything, including my body. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. Tell me he didn't touch you. He tried. The admission was barely audible. One night, about 3 months after my parents died, he'd been drinking, celebrating some business deal. He came to my room and... Elena's breath hitched. He said he was tired of waiting, that I was his whether I liked it or not. Elena? Adrian's voice was raw with fury and pain. Did he... No. Elena shook her head quickly. I fought him off, broke a vase over his head and ran, but not before he... She gestured vaguely toward her left shoulder. He left marks, reminders of what would happen if I ever tried to refuse him again. Adrian went very still. Show me. Adrian, no, I don't want you to see. Show me. It wasn't a request. With trembling fingers, Eleanor pulled down the left sleeve of her dress. The scars were old now, faded to silver lines against her skin, but still visible. 5 parallel marks where Marcus's claws had torn through her flesh when she tried to pull away from him. Adrian stared at the scars for a long moment, his breathing harsh in the quiet room. When he finally reached out to touch them, his fingers were gentle as feathers. He marked you, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm, tried to claim you. It didn't work. Eleanor's voice was stronger now, steadied by his touch. The marks healed clean. I'm not his, no matter what he tried to do. How did you escape? My mother's sister lived in the next county. She'd never liked Marcus, had tried to warn me about him. I wrote to her in secret, told her what was happening. She sent money and a carriage in the dead of night. I ran with nothing but the clothes on my back. And then? I hid. Elena's voice was small again. Changed my name, dyed my hair, learned to make myself invisible. I worked in kitchens and laundries, anywhere I could disappear into the background. I've been running for 2 years. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing gently over the scars. Finally he spoke. You're not running anymore. Adrian, no. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're not running anymore, Elena. You're home. He'll find me eventually, Elena whispered, voicing her deepest fear. He's powerful, well-connected. He's probably been hunting for me this whole time. When he discovers I'm here, let him come. Adrian's eyes flashed gold, and for a moment Eleanor caught a glimpse of the predator beneath the gentle exterior. I've been wanting an excuse to deal with men like Marcus Aldridge. They think their money and connections put them above consequences. You don't understand. He's dangerous. So am I. Adrian's voice dropped to a growl. The difference is, I protect what's mine, and you, Elena Thorne, are mine to protect now. The possessive words should have frightened her, should have reminded her of Marcus's claims of ownership. Instead, they sent warmth flooding through her chest. This felt different. Adrian wasn't claiming her like property. He was offering himself as her shield. "I'm scared," Elena admitted. "Of Marcus? Of this?" She gestured between them. "Of caring about you. Of letting myself believe that I could actually have this, have you, only to lose it all when reality comes crashing down." Adrian's thumb brushed away a tear Eleanor hadn't realized had fallen. "You're not going to lose me. I don't care about your past, about what Marcus tried to take from you. All I care about is you, here, now, safe in my arms." And then he was kissing her, soft and sweet and devastating. Elena melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as 2 years of loneliness and fear finally began to crack apart. She could taste the promise on his lips, the absolute certainty that she was protected, cherished. When they finally broke apart, Elena was breathing hard, her heart racing for entirely different reasons than fear. "Stay with me tonight," Adrian murmured against her forehead. "Not for anything improper, just stay. Let me hold you. Let me prove that you're safe." Eleanor looked up into his amber eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and fierce protectiveness. For the first time in 2 years, she wanted to stop running, wanted to trust that maybe, just maybe, she could have this. "Okay," she whispered. Adrian's smile was blinding. He gathered her into his arms, carrying her to the large chair by the fireplace. Elena curled against his chest, feeling more secure than she had since her parents died. His heartbeat was steady beneath her cheek, his arms warm and strong around her. "Sleep, love," Adrian murmured into her hair. "I've got you." For the first time in years, Elena let herself truly rest. Neither of them knew that 3 floors below, a messenger had just arrived at the palace gates with a letter bearing Marcus Aldridge's seal, or that by morning Elena's carefully constructed world would begin to crumble as the past she'd been running from finally caught up to her. But for now, in the safety of Adrian's arms, Elena allowed herself to believe in happy endings. It would have to be enough. 2 months later, Elena stood at Adrian's side in the grand ballroom, wearing a gown of midnight blue silk that made her feel like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The Harvest Moon Ball was the social event of the season, bringing together nobles from across the realm to celebrate another year of prosperity. Elena had tried to convince Adrian she should remain in his quarters. Servants didn't attend such gatherings, but he'd been immovable on the subject. "You're not a servant anymore," he'd told her firmly that morning, as he'd presented her with the exquisite gown. "You're my acknowledged companion, my future mate. It's time the court understood that." Now, surrounded by hundreds of the realm's most powerful people, Elena felt exposed in a way that made her skin crawl. She'd grown comfortable in Adrian's private world, in their stolen moments away from prying eyes. But this was different. This was public declaration, and she wasn't sure she was ready for the scrutiny that would follow. Adrian seemed to sense her discomfort. His hand found the small of her back, a warm, steadying presence that helped quiet her racing heart. "Breathe," he murmured near her ear. "You belong here." Elena nodded, trying to project the confidence she didn't feel. Around them, conversations flowed like wine, discussions of trade agreements, marriage alliances, territorial disputes, the usual political machinations that kept the realm running. She was just beginning to relax when she saw him. Marcus Aldridge stood in the arched doorway at the far end of the ballroom, his pale blue eyes scanning the crowd with predatory focus. He looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, lean, conventionally handsome, in a cold way that had once fooled her into thinking him trustworthy. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his expensive clothes impeccably tailored. To anyone who didn't know better, he looked like the epitome of noble refinement. Elena knew better. The breath left her lungs in a rush. The ballroom suddenly felt too warm, too crowded, too small. Her vision tunneled until all she could see was Marcus's face, the cruel smile that spread across his lips when his gaze found her across the room. "Elena?" Adrian's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's wrong?" She couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely think past the roaring panic that filled her head. Marcus was here. After 2 years of running, of hiding, of believing she was finally safe, he'd found her, and he was walking toward them. "Elena?" Adrian's hand cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. His amber eyes were sharp with concern. "Talk to me." "He's here," she whispered. "Marcus, he's here." Adrian's expression went deadly still. His gaze flicked over her shoulder, scanning the crowd, and Eleanor saw the exact moment he spotted her tormentor. The temperature around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Stay close to me," Adrian commanded softly. "Whatever happens, stay by my side." Eleanor nodded mutely, her hands trembling as she gripped Adrian's arm. She could feel Marcus approaching like a storm front, dark and dangerous and inevitable. "Elena?" Marcus's voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, cultured, with an undercurrent of ownership that made her skin crawl. "My darling girl, you look well." She forced herself to turn, to face the nightmare from her past. Marcus stood barely 3 feet away, his pale eyes raking over her with familiar possessiveness. He looked her up and down slowly, deliberately, as if cataloguing what was his. "Hello, Marcus." Elena's voice came out stronger than she'd expected. "Lord Aldridge," Marcus corrected with a thin smile. "Though I suppose in private you may still call me by my given name. Old habits, after all." Adrian stepped slightly forward, his body language shifting into something predatory and protective. "Lord Aldridge, I don't believe we've been introduced. I am King Adrian Blackstone." Marcus's smile widened, but it never reached his eyes. "Your Majesty, what an unexpected pleasure. I had no idea you were acquainted with my Elena." "Your Elena?" Adrian's voice was deceptively mild, but Elena could feel the leashed power radiating from him. "Oh, yes." Marcus's gaze never left Elena's face. "Elena and I have quite a history, don't we, darling? We were engaged to be married before she took it into her head to run away. A moment of feminine hysteria, I'm sure you understand. Young women can be so emotional." The condescending words hit Elena like physical blows. She felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller, the confident woman she'd been learning to be crumbling under Marcus's familiar manipulation. "Is that so?" Adrian's tone remained conversational, but Eleanor could see the golden flecks beginning to swirl in his amber eyes. Indeed. Marcus stepped closer to Eleanor, and she had to fight every instinct not to flee. "I've been searching for her for quite some time. I was beginning to worry something terrible had happened to her. Imagine my relief when I learned she'd found employment here at the palace." The way he said employment made it sound sordid, shameful. Elena's cheeks burned with humiliation. "I've come to take her home, of course," Marcus continued, reaching out as if to touch Elena's face. "She's been gone quite long enough." Adrian's hand shot out, catching Marcus's wrist in a grip that made the other man wince. "I wouldn't if I were you." "Surely you don't object to a man reclaiming his betrothed?" Marcus's smile was razor-sharp now. "Elena may have forgotten her obligations, but I have not. She belongs to me, Your Majesty. She always has." "She belongs to me," Elena said quietly. The words came from somewhere deep inside her, from the part of her that had survived Marcus's cruelty and learned to fight back. Both men turned to look at her in surprise. "I belong to myself," Elena repeated, louder this time. "I was never your betrothed, Marcus. You forged those documents just like you forged everything else." Marcus's mask of civility slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold fury beneath. "Elena, darling, you're being hysterical again. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No." Elena stepped closer to Adrian, drawing strength from his steady presence. We have nothing to discuss. You stole my inheritance, my home, my life. You tried to force yourself on me. I owe you nothing." "You owe me everything," Marcus snarled, his voice rising enough that nearby conversations began to falter. "I saved you from ruin, gave you a home when you had nothing. You ungrateful little—" "That's enough." Adrian's voice cut through Marcus's tirade like a blade. The king stepped forward, placing himself between Eleanor and Marcus, and the sheer force of his presence made several nearby nobles step back nervously. "She still loves me," Marcus insisted, his desperation beginning to show through his polished facade. "Ask her. Deep down, she knows she belongs to me. She always comes back to me eventually." Adrian laughed. The sound was rich, genuinely amused, and completely without warmth. It carried clearly across the suddenly silent ballroom, drawing the attention of every noble within 50 feet. "She still loves you," Adrian repeated, his voice pitched to carry. "That's what you believe." "I know it," Marcus said, though uncertainty was beginning to creep into his voice. "We have a bond that can't be broken. She may have been confused, frightened, but she knows where she belongs." Adrian's smile was predatory. "Guards!" The single word rang out with absolute authority. Immediately, 6 members of the royal guard materialized from the crowd, surrounding Marcus with military precision. "Show this man what I do to liars," Adrian commanded, his voice deadly quiet. Marcus went pale, his confident facade crumbling as he realized the magnitude of his miscalculation. "Your Majesty, surely you don't mean, I am a lord of this realm. You cannot simply—" "I can do whatever I please," Adrian said conversationally. "That's rather the point of being king." He stepped closer to Marcus, his amber eyes glowing with supernatural fire. "You see, Lord Aldridge, you've made a critical error. You've told me that Elena loves you, that she belongs to you, that she'll come back to you." "Because it's true," Marcus said desperately. "Is it?" Adrian turned to Eleanor, his expression softening immediately. "Eleanor, love, do you love this man?" Eleanor met Marcus's pale eyes without flinching. "I despise him." "Do you belong to him?" "I belong to myself, and I choose to give myself to you." "Will you ever go back to him?" "Never." The word came out fierce, final. "I would rather die." Adrian nodded once, then turned back to Marcus. "You see? Every word out of your mouth has been a lie." His voice dropped to a growl. "And I really, truly hate liars." "She's confused," Marcus said frantically as the guards closed in. "She doesn't know what she's saying. I have legal documents." "Forged documents," Adrian corrected. "Did you really think I wouldn't investigate the man who came sniffing around my mate? I know exactly what you did to Elena, what you stole from her, what you tried to take from her." Marcus's face went ashen. "Your mate?" "My mate," Adrian confirmed, his arms sliding around Elena's waist in clear, possessive claim. "My chosen, my future queen, the most precious thing in my entire realm." His eyes blazed with golden fire. "And you dared to put your hands on her?" The temperature in the ballroom seemed to drop. Eleanor could see her breath misting in the suddenly frigid air, could feel the supernatural power rolling off Adrian in waves. Around them, the assembled nobles backed away, recognizing the Alpha King's barely leashed fury. "I claim Elena Thorne as my mate before all these witnesses," Adrian announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "She is under my protection, my care, my exclusive claim. Anyone who disputes this, anyone who dares to touch what is mine, will answer to me personally." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena could feel hundreds of eyes on her, but for the first time she didn't feel exposed. She felt powerful, protected, claimed in the most public way possible. "As for you, Lord Aldridge," Adrian continued, his attention returning to the trembling man before him, "you are hereby banished from this realm. If you are found within our borders again, if you attempt to contact Elena in any way, if you so much as speak her name—" His smile was all teeth. "Well, Let's just say the dungeons are always in need of permanent residents." "You can't do this," Marcus whispered. "I have rights, connections. People will hear about this." "Oh, I certainly hope so," Adrian said cheerfully. "I want everyone to know what happens to men who hurt women under my protection. Guards, escort Lord Aldridge to the border. Make sure he understands the permanence of his banishment." As the guards moved to flank Marcus, he made one last desperate attempt. "Elena, you know this is wrong. You know you belong with me. Tell them." Elena stepped forward, her voice ringing clear in the silent ballroom. "The only thing I know is that you never deserved me, and you never will." Marcus's face contorted with rage and humiliation as the guards began to drag him away. "This isn't over. You think you can just—" His words were cut off as the ballroom doors closed behind him. The silence stretched for another heartbeat, then conversation slowly began to resume as the nobles processed what they'd just witnessed. Adrian turned to Eleanor, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "Are you all right?" Eleanor looked up into his amber eyes, her mate's eyes, her protector's eyes, her king's eyes, and smiled. "I'm perfect." And for the first time in her life, she truly meant it. Adrian's answering smile was radiant. Then he was kissing her, deep and claiming and absolutely shameless, in front of every important person in the realm. Elena melted into him, pouring 2 years of fear and longing into the kiss, knowing that she was finally, truly safe. When they broke apart, the ballroom erupted in applause. Elena laughed against Adrian's lips, giddy with relief and joy and the intoxicating realization that her nightmare was finally over. Marcus was gone. She was claimed, protected, loved. She was home. "Dance with me," Adrian murmured against her ear. "Always," Eleanor whispered back. As Adrian led her onto the dance floor, Elena caught sight of their reflection in the polished marble. She barely recognized the confident, radiant woman staring back at her. Gone was the frightened servant girl who'd scrubbed floors and hid in shadows. In her place stood a queen, Adrian's queen, and she had never felt more beautiful. The days that followed the Harvest Moon Ball were a whirlwind of change and wonder. Elena woke each morning in Adrian's chambers, their chambers now, to find fresh flowers on her bedside table, and Adrian already dressed for his morning council meetings. He would kiss her forehead gently, whisper promises to see her at lunch, and leave her with a smile that carried her through until his return. For the first time in years, Elena felt truly safe. The constant knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest since fleeing Marcus was finally beginning to loosen. Marcus was gone, banished. The threat that had haunted her dreams was nothing more than an unpleasant memory. But adjusting to life as the future queen was proving more challenging than she'd anticipated. "Your Highness," Lady Catherine Westbrook said, for the 3rd time that morning, her voice tight with barely concealed frustration. "The proper response to a curtsy of acknowledgement is a slight nod of the head, not a full curtsy in return. You outrank her now." Elena bit back a sigh as she attempted the gesture again. Lady Catherine, Adrian's stern-faced etiquette instructor, had been drilling her on court protocol for 2 weeks now. The endless rules about who curtsied to whom, which fork to use for which course, and how to address various levels of nobility made Eleanor's head spin. "Better," Lady Catherine said grudgingly, "though you must stop apologising to the servants, Your Highness. It undermines your authority." "But I dropped the cup," Eleanor protested. "It was my fault Maria had to clean it up. Common courtesy—" "Is not the same as royal courtesy," Lady Catherine interrupted. "You must remember your position now. The servants serve you. That is the natural order of things." Elena nodded dutifully, though something in her rebelled against the idea. She remembered too well what it felt like to scrub those marble floors, to be invisible and overlooked. How could she simply forget? After her etiquette lesson ended, Eleanor escaped to the palace gardens. her one refuge from the overwhelming world of royal expectations. She'd discovered a small alcove behind the rose garden where she could sit in peace and remember who she'd been before all of this. She was reading one of Adrian's books, a collection of poetry that he'd left on her nightstand with a note saying it reminded him of her, when soft footsteps approached. "Your Highness?" A tentative voice made Elena look up. A young woman in a servant's dress stood at the edge of the alcove, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid. She couldn't be more than 16, and her brown eyes were bright with nervous excitement. "Hello," Elena said warmly, setting aside her book. "You're Sarah, isn't it, from the kitchens?" The girl's face lit up with surprise and pleasure. "You remember me, Your Highness?" "Of course. Please, sit." Elena patted the stone bench beside her. "And call me Elena when we're alone." Sarah's eyes went wide. "Oh, I couldn't, Your Highness. It wouldn't be proper." "Nonsense." Elena smiled. "I was scrubbing those same kitchen floors not so long ago. I haven't forgotten where I came from." Slowly, carefully, Sarah perched on the edge of the bench. That's actually why I wanted to speak with you, Your Highness, if you don't mind me saying so." "Go on." "It's just—" Sarah twisted her hands in her apron. "Some of us in the kitchens, we've been talking about how you were one of us. And now you're going to be queen. And we wondered—" She took a deep breath. "Is it true that you're going to help women like us? Women who have nowhere else to go?" Elena's heart clenched. "What do you mean?" "Well, I heard Lady Margaret telling the head cook that you've been asking about starting some sort of refuge for women who've been hurt by their husbands or fathers or—" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Men who think they own us?" Eleanor had indeed been discussing such a project with Adrian. The idea had come to her gradually as she settled into her new life, born from the knowledge that there were countless other women out there living with the same fear and desperation she'd once known. "Yes," Elena said softly, "it's something I care about very much." "My sister," Sarah blurted out suddenly, then clapped a hand over her mouth as if she'd said too much. "What about your sister?" Sarah looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "She's married to a blacksmith in the village, Thomas Cray. He drinks, and when he drinks he gets angry. She has bruises, Your Highness, always has bruises, but she says there's nowhere to go. Says a woman's place is with her husband, no matter what." Eleanor's chest tightened with familiar pain. How many women were trapped in situations like that? How many suffered in silence because they believed they had no other choice? "What's your sister's name?" Elena asked. Lily Cray." "I'll remember that name," Elena promised. "And Sarah? Tell your sister that things are going to change. Soon." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You really mean it, don't you? You're going to help women like her." "I'm going to try." Elena reached out and squeezed the girl's hand. "We have to look out for each other. Who else will?" That evening, as Elena sat at the small table in their private dining room, she told Adrian about her conversation with Sarah. He listened intently, his amber eyes growing darker as she described Lily Cray's situation. "I want to do something," Elena said finally. "I know I'm still learning to be whatever it is I'm supposed to be, but this feels important. It feels like something I can actually do to make a difference." Adrian reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Tell me what you need." "You're not going to tell me I should focus on other things, on learning protocol and how to be a proper queen?" "Elena." Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. "A proper queen cares about her people, all of them, especially the ones who can't protect themselves." His thumb traced over her knuckles. "Besides, I fell in love with your compassion. Why would I want you to hide it now?" Eleanor felt warmth bloom in her chest. Even after all this time, Adrian's unwavering support still amazed her. "I was thinking we could start small," she said. "A house in the city, somewhere women could go when they need to escape, with healers and maybe teachers to help them learn trades so they can support themselves." "That's not small, love." Adrian smiled. "That's revolutionary and brilliant." "You think so?" I think you're going to change lives." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her palm. "How can I help?" They spent the next 2 hours planning, Elena's excitement growing as Adrian offered suggestions and resources. A building near the cathedral that had been empty for months, funding from the royal treasury, healers from the palace who could volunteer their services. "We'll need someone to run it," Elena mused, "someone the women will trust." "What about you?" Elena looked up in surprise. "Me? But I'm supposed to be learning to be queen." "You are learning to be queen," Adrian said firmly. "This is exactly the kind of work a queen should be doing, leading by example, showing the realm that women matter, that their safety and well-being are priorities." Elena felt something settle in her chest, a sense of purpose she'd never experienced before. "I want to visit Lily Cray tomorrow, Sarah's sister, see what her situation is like." "We'll go together," Adrian said without hesitation. "You don't have to—" "Eleanor." His voice was quiet but absolute. "Wherever you go, I go. That's not going to change." The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her, but instead it sent warmth spiraling through her chest. Adrian's protectiveness wasn't about controlling her. It was about supporting her. There was a world of difference. Later that night, as they lay in bed together, Elena curled against Adrian's side, she found herself thinking about how much had changed. Not just her circumstances, but her sense of self. The frightened girl who'd scrubbed floors and hid in shadows felt like a different person entirely. "Adrian," she said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. For believing I was worth saving. For letting me figure out who I am instead of trying to make me into someone else." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "You saved yourself, love. All I did was give you a safe place to heal." Eleanor pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "I love you. And I love you more than I ever thought possible." As Elena drifted off to sleep, she felt more peaceful than she had in years. Marcus was gone. Her future was bright with possibility. She had work that mattered, a man who cherished her, and for the first time in her life, real purpose. Tomorrow she would begin the work of helping other women find their own freedom. It wouldn't be easy. Changing centuries of tradition never was. But she had Adrian's support, the resources of the crown, and most importantly, the understanding that came from having lived through the darkness herself. She was going to make a difference. She was going to help women like Lily Cray, like Sarah, like the girl she herself had once been. And for the first time since her parents died, Elena felt truly proud of who she was becoming. The broken girl was healing. In her place, a queen was being born. 3 months later, Elena stood before the floor-length mirror in the Queen's chambers, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at her. The gown was a masterpiece of ivory silk and golden thread, fitted perfectly to her form and embroidered with intricate wolves that seemed to dance in the candlelight. Her dark hair had been arranged in an elaborate style, woven through with pearls and tiny golden roses. The crown, her crown, rested on the dressing table nearby, waiting for the moment Adrian would place it on her head. Today was her mating ceremony. Today she would officially become Adrian's queen. "You look like a goddess," Sarah whispered from behind her. The girl had become Eleanor's personal maid at Elena's own request, much to the horror of the head housekeeper. Elena didn't care about protocol. She wanted people around her who remembered where she'd come from. "I feel like I'm about to throw up," Elena admitted with a shaky laugh. "That's normal, Your Highness," Lady Catherine said briskly as she made final adjustments to the gown's train. Even the strict etiquette instructor had softened toward Elena over the past months, especially after seeing the genuine care Elena showed for the palace staff. Every bride feels nervous on her wedding day. Even queen brides. Especially queen brides. Lady Catherine's stern expression cracked into something almost resembling a smile. The entire realm will be watching after all. Eleanor's stomach fluttered at the reminder. representatives from every major house in the kingdom had arrived for the ceremony, along with ambassadors from allied nations. The cathedral would be packed with hundreds of the most important people in the known world, all there to watch a former kitchen maid become queen. A soft knock at the door interrupted her spiralling anxiety. "Enter!" Lady Catherine called. Adrian stepped into the room, magnificent in his ceremonial robes of deep blue and gold. His amber eyes found Eleanor immediately, and the look that crossed his face made her breath catch. "Leave us," he said quietly, never taking his eyes off Elena. "Your Majesty, it's bad luck to see the bride before—" Lady Catherine began. "Out!" Adrian's voice carried the unmistakable tone of command. Lady Catherine and Sarah hurried from the room, leaving Elena alone with her soon-to-be mate. Adrian approached slowly, as if she were a wild creature he might frighten. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "I'm terrified," Elena confessed. "Of marrying me? Of disappointing everyone, of not being good enough, of making a mistake that embarrasses you." The words tumbled out in a rush. Adrian reached for her hands, his touch warm and steadying. "Eleanor, look at me." Reluctantly she met his gaze. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" he asked softly. "A servant girl playing dress-up? I see the woman who risked everything to tend a stranger's wounds, who shows kindness to people others overlook, who fights for those who can't fight for themselves." His thumbs traced over her knuckles. "I see my mate, my queen, the other half of my soul." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough?" "You survived Marcus. You survived 2 years of running and hiding. You built a new life from nothing." Adrian's voice was fierce with pride. "If that's not strength, I don't know what is." "That's different. This is—" Eleanor gestured helplessly at her elaborate gown, the crown waiting nearby. "This is you accepting what you've always deserved." Adrian cupped her face gently. Love, protection, a place to belong, the power to make a real difference in the world. Eleanor thought of the women's refuge they'd opened just last week, of Lily Cray, who had walked through its doors with her 2 young children and tears of relief streaming down her face, of the dozen other women who had already found safety there. "The refuge is working," she said softly, "because of you, because you refused to let your pain be meaningless." Adrian's smile was radiant. "You're already changing the world, Elena. The crown is just going to give you more power to do it." A horn sounded in the distance, signalling that the ceremony would begin soon. Eleanor took a shaky breath, trying to centre herself. "Are you ready?" Adrian asked. Eleanor looked at herself in the mirror one more time. The woman staring back at her was a far cry from the terrified girl who had scrubbed floors in borrowed clothes. This woman stood tall, chin raised, eyes bright with purpose. This woman had work to do, people to protect, a kingdom to help rule. This woman was a queen. "I'm ready," Elena said, and meant it. The cathedral was even more overwhelming than Elena had imagined. Every pew was packed with nobility in their finest clothes, and the soaring stone walls seemed to amplify every whisper, every rustle of silk. Hundreds of candles cast dancing shadows on the stained glass windows, bathing everything in golden light. Elena walked down the aisle slowly, her arm linked through that of Lord Commander Hayes, who Adrian had chosen to give her away since she had no male relatives. Every step brought her closer to Adrian, who waited at the altar, looking like a god in his ceremonial robes. The priest's words washed over her in a blur of ancient vows and sacred promises. Elena responded when prompted, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. But it wasn't until Adrian took her hands that everything else faded away. "Elena Thorne," Adrian said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "I claim you as my mate, my partner, my equal. I promise to protect you, cherish you, and stand beside you for all the days of my life. Will you accept my claim?" "I accept," Elena whispered, then stronger, "I accept." The golden thread that had connected them since their first touch flared to brilliant life, visible now as Adrian's supernatural power wrapped around them both. Elena felt the bond settle into place with an almost audible click, permanent and unbreakable. "By the power vested in me by the gods and the crown," the priest announced, "I pronounce you mated for life. Your Majesty, you may mark your queen." Adrian's eyes flashed gold as his canines elongated slightly. Elena tilted her head, baring the curve of her neck in willing submission. The bite was quick, more ritual than pain, and Elena felt the supernatural mark settle into her skin like warm honey. She was his, completely, permanently, joyfully his. "My queen," Adrian murmured against her throat. "My king," Elena whispered back. The priest lifted the delicate crown of white gold and sapphires, placing it gently on Elena's head. "I present to you Queen Eleanor Blackstone, mate to our Alpha King, protector of the realm." The cathedral erupted in cheers and applause. Eleanor turned to face the assembled crowd, Adrian's arm steady around her waist, and felt a surge of confidence that surprised her with its strength. These people were hers now, her responsibility, her charges, her kingdom to help protect and nurture. The scared girl who had hidden in shadows was gone forever. In her place stood a queen who would fight for the voiceless, protect the vulnerable, and rule with compassion. The reception was a blur of congratulations, toasts, and elaborate dances. Elena moved through it all with growing confidence, accepting the bows and curtsies of nobles who had once looked through her as if she didn't exist. Some still seemed sceptical of her low birth, but their opinions mattered less and less as the evening wore on. When Adrian finally led her away from the celebration, Eleanor felt drunk on more than champagne. She felt drunk on possibility, on the future stretching out before them bright with promise. "How do you feel, my queen?" Adrian asked as they entered their private chambers. "Like I could take on the world," Elena laughed. "Good." Adrian's hands found the fastenings of her elaborate gown. "Because tomorrow we start planning the second refuge and the scholarship program for young women and the new laws protecting wives from violent husbands." Elena turned in his arms, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "Have I mentioned lately that I adore you?" "Show me," Adrian murmured against her lips, and Elena did, pouring all her love and wonder and fierce joy into their kiss. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "No more running?" he asked softly. "No more running," Elena promised. "I'm home." Later, as they lay tangled together in their marriage bed, Elena traced lazy patterns on Adrian's chest and marvelled at the journey that had brought her here. From terrified servant to beloved queen, from broken survivor to fierce protector of others who had suffered as she had. "What are you thinking about?" Adrian asked, his fingers combing gently through her hair. "Everything! How far we've come! How much has changed!" Elena pressed a kiss to his collarbone. "How much good we can do together!" "We're going to change everything," Adrian said with quiet conviction. "No more women suffering in silence, no more girls believing they're worthless, no more predators like Marcus thinking they can take whatever they want without consequences." Elena smiled against his skin. "Promise?" "I promise, we promise." As sleep began to claim her, Elena allowed herself one last look around the room that was now truly theirs. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting everything in silver and shadow. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. There would be council meetings and diplomatic dinners, legislation to propose and traditions to carefully, thoughtfully change. But tonight she was simply Elena, Adrian's mate, his chosen queen, his beloved, the girl who had lost everything and found something infinitely better in return. The girl who had learned that sometimes, when you stop running from your past, you find your future waiting with open arms. And as Elena drifted off to sleep in the safety of Adrian's embrace, she smiled. Tomorrow they would begin the real work of ruling together, of building the kingdom they both dreamed of. Tonight she was just a woman deeply, completely, perfectly in love. It was more than enough. It was everything.